Running.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome
Hello,
to another
hello.
night
Hello,
of the Seeker.
hello. Welcome.
Okay, I'm gonna make this slide.
So let's everybody warm up, get to it.
Thanks for tuning into Seeker.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. Hey, there he is. Hello.
Hello, back again. It's gonna be like that tonight.
Sometimes you just do what you got to do.
I may get out a Polaroid camera and just reverse it. Just take photos and put them up there.
That'll work. Just one after another.
Yeah.
Old school.
I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a long time.
I think we missed 2 weeks, so I'm sorry for our viewers that we were unavailable for 2 weeks. It does seem like a long, long time. We're off our flow, our rhythm. It is the rhythm of life.
Sorry that I haven't seen you. I'm sorry. Sorry.
What is
Sorry.
what's happening?
Okay, so this week we're coming with a new format. It's coming straight at you. And Daniel's already confused about the new format. But regardless, I will move forward. He's unplugging me. The new format is this. Suzanne is going to tee up a question or the verse, whatever it is.
Face.
And then,
I'm so with you. With
I don't
Daniel's face.
You're confusing me, Daniel. Do you not know what's going on?
No, I think this is just, I can't hear a word Daniel's saying. I can't hear the words coming out of your mouth, Daniel.
My audio is replaying everything we've just said. You guys hear that?
No, that's
Yeah.
you. You have to turn off.
It's the Matrix again.
Oh boy.
We're stuck in the Matrix.
I have to do what?
Turn off the Microsoft Edge, whatever that came on. Just turn it off.
But yes, Jesse was right. We did have a 2-week hiatus. We had all sorts of things going down, but they were all super fun, positive things,
Yep.
you know.
Oh, that was weird. Okay.
Oh, and Daniel was caught. He was unplugged from the Matrix
I was totally in the Matrix.
Yep,
I was looping.
Yep.
It's crazy.
a week ago. See a cat. There's no such thing as deja vu.
That's right. That's right.
No such thing.
Yeah. Okay, Copper Top, are you ready to get going?
Is that me?
No, that was, remember
Suzanne.
Copper Top? That was another Matrix reference. Copper Top. Yeah, so anyways, we were explaining what the format was while Daniel was looking like this. So the format, Suzanne is going to give us a verse, and that verse is going to be like done right at the start of every Seeker. I don't know how long this will go. We're going to try it out. And then we don't have any real heads up as to what it's going to be or why it's going to be. We're just going to fly in blind. But we trust Suzanne to always like feed up good stuff. So that's why she has this great responsibility. And so she is going to tee it up and read a verse and say why she picked the verse or whatever she wants to like say to tee up the thought, and then we'll go from there. So.
All right, gentlemen.
Is it up?
Yes. So you guys got a sneak peek at this earlier today. It's not a complete surprise. Today, Zechariah 7, 4 through 10. Then the word of the Lord of hosts came to me. Say to all the people of the land and the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th month and in the 7th for these 70 years, was it for me that you fasted? And when you eat and when you drink, do you not eat for yourselves and drink for yourselves? Were not these words that the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and prosperous, with her cities around her in the south and the lowland were inhabited? And the word of the Lord came to Zechariah, saying, Thus says the Lord of hosts, render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widows, the fatherless, the sojourner, or the poor, and let none of you devise evil against another in your heart. So I feel like this one's a little self-explanatory.
Roll credit.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say anything.
What? That's a cop out.
All right. So I just what I would look at in particular in this passage is the contrast between what the people were doing and what God was looking for. So take it away, gentlemen.
Cool. And I was teasing about saying it was a cop out. She always has the right to just drop the verse and walk off. So hey, it's all fair game.
But she comes up with the verse because she has a much better idea about something.
There is a little context regarding the fasting that we kind of probably should get into.
Hit it, bro.
About, right? Because Zechariah, remember, he's prophesying to the ones who came back from exile. So they've had the judgment of Babylon came on Judah in the south. Jerusalem is destroyed. The temple is gone, and they're carried off into captivity. 70 years later, they start to come back. And that's who Zechariah is working with, the ones who came back to rebuild the temple. Now, they had been engaging in this annual fast, this 5th month fast, which I understand that certain Jews still do today. It's the fast of Tish B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av, the 5th month. And it's called the saddest day in the Jewish calendar because it commemorates the destruction of the temple. It commemorates the all these kind of horrible events in Jewish history are sort of remembered on this day. But they would fast, and they would hold this fast in remembrance of their loss. So they come to the priests in Jerusalem and they say, do we need to keep doing this? Do we need to keep fasting this remembrance of loss and mourning and sorrow and for everything that's gone before? And this is the answer that they get from God. So that's the kind of context.
Question, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Because I think, Daniel, you've been going through this a little bit more recently, so maybe you already know the answer on this. So my footnote points to 2 Kings 25:8, which says, in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, that was the 19th. Wait, I grabbed the wrong one. Sorry. It was, yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. This is referring, I guess this is actually Zechariah 8:19. This is talking later. It says, thus says the Lord of hosts, the fast of the 4th month and the fast of the 5th and the fast of the 7th and the fast of the 10th shall be to the house of Judah seasons of joy and gladness and cheerful feasts. Therefore, love, truth, and peace. So what is the difference between those ones? Because those ones sound like they're supposed to be joyous fasts, not lamenting fasts.
That is a very good question. And I'm not exactly clear on the significance of each of the different fasts, but the 5th month, the one that they were specifically asking about in chapter 7, is a commemoration of the destruction of the temple. Yeah.
Okay. So they're just different purposes for the fast, like what they'd probably focus on during the different fasts.
That would be I think that's a pretty fair statement. Yeah.
A theme though that's running through here, but is all the way through the Bible, Old Testament, New, is there's an experience that is had. The Lord wants his people and or the situation, he wants them to embrace the experience. And then after the experience, it seems that he always seems to say, don't forget this experience. I mean, what you said, Daniel, I can think of so many examples. You think about the Exodus, they come out, later that Passover feast is what the Lord in 1 Corinthians 11 reminds them of. And he says, and when you do this, when you remember me. And there are all these times as, Joshua and the crew cross the sea, he says, put these monuments in place so that you will not forget, so that you will remember. And, it's just like, we could go on and on and on, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is reoccurring theme about the fact that you have this experience. And sometimes you have this experience because of consequences to your actions, sometimes not. But in either case, the Lord's like, remember this experience. And he wants us to remember it so that we don't embrace the same sort of experience again, right? So it was cool that you were saying that, because it's like, hey, look, even if they had said, wow, well, what was it like to go all the way back to Babylonian exile? Like, maybe we can't remember all the way back to Jeremiah. It wouldn't be very hard for them to remember all the really like pain and agony that even Nehemiah felt when he tried to come back and start rebuilding the wall. He had so much pressure against him, and think about what it took to actually get that done. Like, they could remember that far back. That's why I like that you brought that out, because the Lord is always about, but don't forget this, please remember. And he has all these prophets in the place to keep reminding everyone. But maybe this goes to Suzanne's point about that contrast, and the contrast is here, and because we should keep remembering all these things so that we can grow from them, so that we can change. We don't forget.
I think that's the key thing, right? Is it just the memory with no impact moving forward, right? And I that's it right there, is we remember for a purpose, so that we don't repeat our same mistakes, so that we don't continue down that path, but rather it redirects us. And I think that gets into the chapter 8, where he says these periods of mourning are going to turn to periods of joy and gladness. That when we see the point, and that's what we're remembering, right? What was the point of the judgment that came? The point of the judgment was we were not walking according to the will of the Lord. Pure and simple, just not doing what he wanted us to do. And it wasn't that we weren't washing our hands the right way, and it wasn't that we were eating the wrong kind of bird. It's that society had gotten off track. The way that people were living their day-to-day lives had gotten sideways of what the Lord's will was. And so that's where the meat of this passage is. And that's where starting in verse 9, that's what the memory is, right? That's what we're supposed to remember. And it's not about the fasting. It's not about the big display of remorse. Oh, we're so sorry, but we're going to go and live however we want to live, right?
Yeah.
I find that verse, verse 5 would be super powerful when God says, say to all the people of the land and the priests, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th month and in the 7th, for these 70 years, was it for me that you fasted? And you could almost replace that, was it for me that you fasted, with anything that God could ask any one of us. Was it for me that you did X?
Was it for me that you took the Lord's Supper every week?
Right, exactly. Oh
yeah,
for sure.
Good.
Yeah, you do. Was it for me that you sang
That's
that
what
song?
he's saying.
Right?
Yeah.
Was it for me that you prayed? Right? Like, are you praying for yourself? Are you praying for, and we do this all, I do this all the time. Like, I feel like, I'm trying to figure out, I think inadvertently we have a tendency to do this, where we're trying to make it like, what's in it for me, right? What do I get out of it, right? And God calls it out right here. And it's pretty scary. It's definitely a reality check, because when it's not, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, my bad.
I was just winding down. That's it. Go ahead.
But how often is it what we get out of it is that feeling of, well, check that box this week, right? How often is that what we get out of it? Well, okay, got that done for the week. Now I can go on and do whatever else I'm going to do. But what's really cool in verse 5 is that the priests get called out too. Right?
That's true. That's a good point.
They're the ones who ought to know better. the ones who ought to be clear on what the law says and what God's will is, they're not exempt either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is big.
Yeah, even the way that we preach our sermons, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Surely it's not those people. It's you people, right? It's not these people. That's super strong point that he's calling out the people that everyone would have assumed had it right, for sure.
The ones they're coming to for the answer.
Yeah. He's like, let me start here. It's a sick joke and bad, and too bad we can't edit it out, but I'm already rolling now. It's the way that I always say, like when the day of judgment comes, like I'm going to be in this line and I'm going to look ahead and see like, Daniel walk up there and he's like, depart from me. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting in. Right. So I'm just like, I'm good. I'll just walk on over, and that's kind of the, you look at this and it's like, oh man, you started with the priest.
Uh-huh.
Oh man, like we must have really messed up. We couldn't possibly be getting it right. And then when you get down to, 9 and 10, and we shouldn't skip over this is very powerful things. But if we just saw like, I don't know, maybe like a billboard up, if you were driving and you saw a billboard and it said, show kindness and mercy, you would be like, yeah, of course, that's like come to work item. Of course I show kindness and mercy. But he wouldn't have said that if they were nailing that, right? Yep. And I think that's the thing. It's the little things like this that seem so simple and so basic that you almost feel like you don't need to be reminded of it. But it's like when I'm driving my car down the highway and the speed limit's 60 and I'm doing like 75 and confession. And my daughter says from the back seat, my oldest daughter always says, she's like, Daddy, driving too fast, right? And I think, I don't need you to remind me how fast I'm driving because it's right in front of me, right? This is how it works, because you're like, I don't need you to tell me how to show kindness. Everybody knows how. But James tells us that it's right in front of us.
Yep. And we'll get into 9, 10, and 11, but I don't want to skip 7 because 7 is the scary part. Because he says, were not these the words that the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets? The ones who came back when you guys were living high on the hog before the exile, when things were going good in the south and Jerusalem was prosperous and you guys had it made in the shade. The word didn't change. It's the same message. And they didn't listen then. And you guys better pay attention now. That's the scary part, man. Because if we can't see ourselves in verse 7, we're not looking very hard.
Yeah, and on the flip side of it too, it actually goes to show like the loving mercy of God to come back over and over and give another chance, right? Like he's coming back and like, yeah, this happened last time, but guess what? I'm long suffering, right? Yep. I'm forgiving, like I'm back, and we're having this talk again because I love you. So both sides are very powerful.
I mean, what you said, Jesse, is such a strong point because if we take like Nebuchadnezzar and Judah and that, the Babylonians coming in, think about how many times Jeremiah had to remind them and how many times he told them, look, the Lord, this is the message. So much Jeremiah's he's put in the pit, like bad things are done to him. And every time he comes back with the same message, he was like, same God, same message. And they're like, go away, right? And it's over and over. But that's really God's, like you said, this is God's long suffering. And he's showing how much he loves the people and he's trying to help them so much, in fact, that he even gives the king an ultimatum. And he's like, look, just give up, and everything's still going to work out, right? But it's our stubborn heart when we're like, maybe you're missing it, God. Now, to Daniel's point, what's I think I'm glad you stopped didn't let me do this, Daniel. But verse 7, what makes it so strong, like you said, is now they have the example to remember.
Mm-hmm.
They can go, wait a minute. So what happened? What happened to Zedekiah? Like, what happened to that kingdom? Oh yeah, his kids got killed in front of him, and he got his eyes gouged out. Oh yeah, that's terrible. And they can look at that and say, look how long it took everything to come back, and you've forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still like, but you still have a chance. And you think about what we would have done. Like, what would you have done? You know, at this point, you know, you would have I would have given up on a people group by now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And even, I know we're just about to change gears here, but even when what you said before, just like having this memory, kind of the tradition of remembering that the Jewish people had, you know, like Jillian, I think you're talking about all the different ways that they would remember different events and everything. And, you know, I was just thinking, like, I can't remember exactly what the story was, but they made like the mound of rocks to remember a covenant between two people. Who was that between? But anyways, there's all sorts of examples of people like building structures or doing something to remember, and like these like standing stones. And I wonder sometimes if we kind of lose that in our lives today. Like, do we do things like, I don't know exactly what that would be, but I feel like today we just kind of just roll forward and we don't take the time to like remember our shortcomings or the things maybe like, or the accomplishments in our lives that that teach us lessons or that bring us closer to God.
I think we have remembrances. We just remember, like, you know, we celebrate our wedding anniversaries. We celebrate our kids' birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes at work, you get your 5-year, your 10-year, or whatever, you know, to commemorate those kind of things. And I think we do that. We're familiar with the concept. We just maybe don't necessarily do it the same way that they did it, right? We wouldn't necessarily call a fast on, like, I don't know, to remember the day like a parent passes away or something like that. I don't know. But we have memorials. We have, you know, graves that we go to. We have, you know, places that are special to us or whatever. And so I just don't think we maybe do it the same way is all.
I guess I was thinking more for myself, like in my own life, like I make like, I don't know what it would look like, right? But I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like, is there like something I could do like on my desk, like have like little like things that I can like almost tell a story on my desk with like little things, like this is the, you know, when I learned what it means to really trust God. Like this is when I, you know, like when I went through cancer, and like this is when I learned to trust God. And I have something, maybe it's a wrist bracelet from the hospital, and I just keep it on my desk to remind myself of when I learned that lesson, or like whatever it might be. Like it just seems like a cool idea to have these things that can trigger our memories. I don't know if we would do it or not, but it seems cool.
Well, yeah, I think I was thinking about that too. But maybe I'll take your example and say, even if there's no physical remembrance, I think the one of the things you were talking about was what I was alluding to earlier with Joshua crossing the Jordan, and it was like, you know, you take these, was it 12 stones, and make sure that they're laid out symbolizing the 12 tribes. I want you to remember them, carry them out, pile them up where you'll end up camping. And he says that to them because that should be a memorial. Now, I think mentally in my head, you know, I think about that song, "Great is Your Faithfulness," because if I could mentally capture, like you said, Jesse, how faithful the Lord is, through the midst of many struggles, even when there's no struggle, just how amazingly powerful he is and faithful he is. And I mean faithful like Romans 8:28, faithful, like faithful based on what he said he's gonna do, right? Based on his will, but faithful nonetheless. If I could just like hang on to that, then the big pile of rocks would always kind of stay in front of me mentally. But I think what kind of happens in my life, it's almost like Daniel was saying, like a gravestone. The grass grows up around it. Because I don't visit the memorial that you're talking about, like free from cancer, whatever. I don't remember it mentally. And it actually creates somewhat of a problem for us when we get to the next struggle, right? Because when we get to the next struggle, we don't go, oh Lord, you were so faithful. I can remember that. I no matter what's in front of me, I really don't have to worry about it because I remember what you did.
Yeah.
Instead, though, I can't see it because there's grass over it, right? I've like built a house on it or something. Parked my 2002 Honda Accord in front of it.
Sweet ride that is.
It's very sporty.
It's gold. It's fast.
I want to kind of get just real quick back into verse 7 before we get done, when he says that were not these the words that the Lord proclaimed by the former prophets. And so I pulled 3 of those out. Micah chapter 6, Micah 6 and verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Same message. The message hasn't changed. Amos chapter 5, take away from me the noise of your songs. This is Amos 5:23. To the melody of your harps I will not listen, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Same message. Message didn't change. And then finally, Hosea chapter 6 and verse 6. I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Same message. Message didn't change. They just didn't listen. And that is the big lesson for us is God's message hasn't changed. Jesus says, I didn't come to get rid of the law. I came to fulfill the law. So now you guys can live beyond the law, right? Like that's really what he does right there. But the message didn't change. And it's not about the fasting and the eating and the drinking and all that. It's about having the heart of God. And that's what this passage is really all about. So we can get into what the message is right here in 9, 10, and 11. But
don't get off that yet.
What's that?
Don't get off that yet, because you said something very key, which is
go for it.
Having the heart of God.
Yeah. Maybe
we should just chat for a second on like, how do we do that? Like day in, day out? Because because the 3 of us definitely are not being so arrogant to say that we wouldn't be caught up in this group, right? I would have been, it was like, I'm the priest, I got it. I would have been one of these guys. How do you guys see that, like, we have the opportunity to do this? I think I'll start it off. I think one way that is helpful it is very biblical, obviously, is just how we help and encourage each other, right? Like it's back to the kind of the speeding thing, what my daughter's doing from the back seat, we're doing from the back seat in each other's lives. But like 1 Corinthians style from Paul, we mean it in a spirit of love. And I think that's one way to help keep reminding each other and help each other have the heart of God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm just going to say this because it's
I could tell. I can see you winding up. You're like,
you did wind up.
It's a total wind up. It's a complete wind up. But this has been on my mind a lot. And I'm trying to phrase it the right way. But I really think that we need to seriously think about this in terms of spiritual warfare. I think we really need, if we want to do that day in and day out, if we want to have the heart of God day in and day out, I think it needs to be, we need to talk more often about spiritual warfare. And I say that going to Colossians chapter 3. The beginning of Colossians 3, when Paul says, if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things that are on earth. And it's verse 3 that really gets me. He says, for you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Well, I'm still walking around. I'm still talking to you guys. But I'm dead. But I'm not dead because my life is hidden with Christ in God. This is spiritual warfare language. This is the metaphysical things that happen to us from the inside out as we are conformed to Christ, as his word comes into our heart and changes our heart, which is exactly what the Lord is saying through Zechariah. That's what he's always told his people. He wants the whole heart and not the muscle in our chest. He wants ourselves, which is a spiritual warfare kind of thing. And I don't think I talk about spiritual warfare enough. I don't think I use those specific words enough when we're talking about the day-to-day living. It's Christ who lives in me. The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. The Galatians 2:20 kind of daily living. Am I off base to say that that is a spiritual warfare issue? And do we think about that in those terms enough?
I don't think you're off base at all. To make sure I wasn't on mute. I don't think you're off base at all. I just to complement what you were saying, I pulled up Romans 8:7, which says, because the carnal mind, yep, my mom's gonna love that. I was in King James. So no wonder you guys, it was like carnal, you ready? That was for you. Because she was like, yes, the boy's back.
Authorized.
ESV, it's okay. But it says, for the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. So I totally agree with you, because when you were in Colossians 3 and you stopped at 4, you stopped at 3.
Mm-hmm.
4 said, when Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. 5 is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. Like, this sounds like a war, Daniel. I totally agree with you. This sounds like a war, which made me think of Romans 8:7, because there is this, there's this part of us in which we're trying to battle to be able to be holy and to live this way. And we shouldn't act like it's a cakewalk. I'll just go take my neighbor flowers. It's going to be great. Mm-hmm. Right. But there's also the battle that's in me. If I go to take the neighbor flowers, I'm like handing flowers and I'm like, man, I don't think they've ever given us any. There is this, that's very simple, but there's this war that's waging. I'm glad you brought this up. You've actually driven me to go back and read Colossians in depth, but that's different, right? We should do that next time. But I completely agree with what you're saying. And Suzanne's got a point too here in the next couple of verses, because a lot of times when we think about, like, if we think about Romans, I think you had mentioned Romans 12:1 and 2, about living a life that's holy and acceptable to God, because it's our reasonable service, not being conformed to this world, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we can show as that good and acceptable will of God. That we think about sometimes just not doing bad things.
Yeah.
Like, that'll get it. I just won't do bad things. But, and this is your wife's point, not mine, but the point is that it's like this kind of dual thing that we're doing. It's not just not doing bad things, it's doing the things that the Lord wants us to do, right? It's not just I'm just not gonna kill anybody. But what would you do in its place? Like, what would you do? And that's when he gets these next verses. He's like, but what would you do? And that's why I like your spiritual warfare example, because it's the battle, right? This is what it is. It's what I won't do, what I will do. What am I going to do? You're going to do the things that strive for peace.
Mm.
Ooh, it's getting hot.
It's getting hot.
And also, Daniel, the spiritual warfare, it just makes me kind of think about, if we're trying to be God-like, to have the heart of God, I think you have to be close in your relationship with him to be able to achieve that. So I think a lot of times we go through the days and they get busy, and we try to remember to like squeeze in a prayer before the meal and a prayer before bed, maybe like something else throughout the day or something, and we do that, and then that becomes kind of like, day to day, that's the thing. And then Sunday is our holy day, and we get to like recharge the batteries and spend maybe a couple hours straight thinking or worshiping with God if we're not checking our phones or something. And then we could say that that's living close to God, but then we're confused why we don't feel like we have what God has. Like we can't seem to emulate God's qualities. Like God's merciful, so we should be merciful, but we have a hard time finding a way to be merciful. God's long suffering, but our patience runs short, and we're like, oh man, it's so hard. Well, it's because we're not close enough. We drift far away, and then we wonder why it's not working.
Which takes us right back to Zechariah 7, right? Because what does God want us to do? Render true judgments. Well, who's the true judge? God is. He says, show kindness. That word kindness, that's the same exact word that appears in God's name, that he names himself in Exodus 34. It's who he is. He says, show me. And mercy to one another, and do not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner, the poor. Those are the people he made specific provisions to protect in his law. Leave the corners of your fields when you harvest, not for me, but for those who need it, right? Don't oppress these people, not your friends, the ones who absolutely need it and who are most subject to being victimized by oppression. And let none of you devise evil against another in your heart. Well, that goes right back to the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, but I say to you. And all those things that Jesus says in that passage in the Sermon on the Mount, that all of those things go to the evil that we devise against one another in our hearts. And so that's exactly what he's talking about. You want to be more like God. You want to show who he is in your life. How do we do that? Right? That's the question. That's what we're talking about. He's telling us what that looks like. He's laying it out for us. We couldn't ask him to be any more clear as to what that is. Now we have to go ahead and go forth and do, right? And I just think personally for me, reframing that, how do I go out and do that? How do I let Christ shine through me more and more each day? Reframing that in terms of spiritual warfare, I think helps me when I think, how am I going to go and do these things?
Well, yeah, I think spiritual warfare is a great way to look at all these things. I mean, there's so many things that could be looked at through that lens, because Satan wants nothing more than you to feel awkward, trying to be merciful to other people, right? Like, I don't want to look like a goody two shoes, or like, I don't know. But I mean, Satan wants us to feel like, he wants us to conform to the world, right? And there's many verses that talk about not being conformed to the world because of that exact problem. There's a lot of people that aren't Christians that do a great job of taking care of the homeless situation, and they take care of the animals that don't have homes, and they take care of all sorts of people where there's needs. They run the homes for my wife's sister is in this home where it's like an adult family community home for people that can't really take care of themselves properly, right? Like, but I mean, you've got people that aren't Christians, like, that have a heart for helping these people that run these homes, and so but Satan doesn't want us to try and outdo that. Like, if we can do that, we're doing good, right? but we're supposed to be separate and apart from the world. Like we're supposed to be like noticeably different with the qualities that that God asks us to have, but we hide them because we don't want to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Satan. That's Satan fighting. He's he's telling us, no, just be comfortable, just do your thing. I'm just as guilty as anyone on that.
Yeah, I agree. He's telling you there's really no pleasure in that. There's no enjoyment in that. There's no glory in that. You know, those are all the things that I would hear. You know, there's no one will remember you for that. Right?
You're gonna look silly.
Gonna look silly.
You're gonna feel foolish.
Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like much fun. You know?
Right. Yep. Good passage, huh?
Yeah.
Somebody knows what they're doing.
I'm glad somebody does. I meant you guys, not me.
Nice. And well, I don't know. If you push through a couple more verses, you end up seeing the fact that you know, after God says, you know, not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner, the poor, and let none of you devise evil against another in your heart. What he says after this is scary, because I think that this, you know, this is each and every one of us at different points in our life. And I think we go in seasons of being good at this and then being bad at this, probably like on average. But verse 11, he says, but they refused to pay attention and turned a stubborn shoulder and stopped their ears that they might not hear. Like they were really trying to shut out God from this message. And then they made their hearts diamond hard, lest they should hear the law and the words that the Lord of hosts had sent by his spirit through the former prophets. Therefore, great anger came from the Lord of hosts. So this is causing a great anger from the Lord. I don't think any of us want to be in a position where we're on the wrong side of God's anger. Then it goes, I'll just keep reading because I think it's so good. And I called and they would not hear. And so they called and I would not hear them, and I would not hear, says the Lord of hosts. That's pretty crazy. It really is. But what's most interesting to me is this active, like refusing to try and hear these words of God. And I think that's how Satan works in our life sometimes. Because I think a lot of times, especially when we're doing things that, you know, like we're fighting these battles with whatever, you know, things might be causing us problems on this earth, like our own little personal battles. I think a lot of times we'll actively shut God out on purpose because we don't want our kid in the back seat telling us we're going 75, right? Like I want to go 75. And at least for myself, I mean, I find myself finding a reason or a way to silence the voice because I want to pursue something selfish or whatever that thing is. And so this is just an awesome passage just to show in a different way how we do that and what God's response is to that.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too when you look at it. What was their sin? It wasn't that their hemlines were too short, and it wasn't that they went dancing that one time, and it's not, you know, it's that they didn't pay attention. They had the word, they had the prophets, they knew what God wanted, and they just didn't care. They didn't care enough to make it a part of who they were. They didn't care enough to make it meaningful in their lives. They just didn't care. And that's when they actively turned their shoulders against it. And that's when they actively refused to hear. They stopped their ears. They turned a stubborn shoulder. And then their hearts became diamond hard. It was that they didn't care. They knew it, and it just didn't matter that much to them.
But I think that's where, as you know, brothers and sisters in Christ, that's where we get to help remind each other all the time of that, the good things, right? Like the reasons to not keep your ears stopped up, right? And encourage each other. I think that's super powerful. I mean, if I'm in my own little bubble, I'm not going to hear all the good things God's doing in people's lives. But when when I talk to other people and I'm like, man, did you hear what happened to this family? Like such and such happened. And it's like, wow, that is amazing. That is like a miracle for them that this happened this way. And even like bad things that happen, but seeing how families respond through those things, it's like, wow, that person really handled that better than I could have ever handled it. This is a reminder. This is a good thing to see, like, these people and how awesome that they are at taking this. How can I do that too? And remember, so I think the example we get from each other really helps to keep us honest when you're in a tight-knit community.
That's a good point. Example, and sometimes we just have to lower the pride deflector shield, which is super hard, and just hear the words of somebody who genuinely cares about you. And you could only assume positive intent from a brother or sister. It's really just trying to remind you, so that I love that you brought that up, Daniel, verse 11, that you don't refuse to pay attention and turn a stubborn shoulder. It's kind of a reminder, so that the next time Daniel's like gnawing at me, I should go. He really cares, because that's the only thing he could. That's the only possible answer, is that he cares about me and he wants us later to be in heaven together. That's the only possible reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Sure. Cool. Thanks all for tuning in to a Seeker Live episode. Liz, thanks for tuning in. Good to see ya. Julian's mom, good to see ya, as always.
JV.
That's it then?
I think so.
Oh wait, he was like,
I think so.
I don't know. If you're just getting warmed up, let's go.
No, I'm good. I was just gonna say goodnight.
when we're out, we're out.
Peace.